Casey, thank you so much for jumping on the AIM podcast.
Absolutely, Doug. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited about this conversation. This has been one I've wanted to do for a while now, and connect with you and talk more about all the exciting things you're working on. But really pumped to have you, man. And I know you're spending some time in Michigan right now, correct?
Indeed, I am. The snow is coming down. I'm looking at it right now and grateful to be here. A little different than LA, right?
That's right. Have you found a spot to cold plunge yet? I saw a video of you on the lake trying to figure out a spot to get in.
You know what? After this podcast, that was my mission. I was gonna go bring a shovel out into the lake, figure out. I've never done a real lake cold plunge. I've done it where I've been like whitewater rafting and it's like ice water around there, but none of it was just frozen over. So this is a little different journey. So I'll let you know how it goes.
I was about to say, yeah, that's I feel like a Michigan lake would be pretty tough to crack into right now.
Yeah, I walked out there last night, just 20, 30, 40 feet out, and it was just solid. And I got like a little puddle of water. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be harder than I expected.
No doubt, man. Well, good luck to you on that, man. But you've been cold plunging a lot recently. Like I feel like that's been a practice you've kind of adopted more recently, right?
Yeah, man. Cold plunge, cold therapy, all of that has really come into my life in a bigger way the last 3 months, where I got a cold plunge installed at my place. And since then, I've never missed a day. And the cold plunge for me, we could talk about the benefits, and I don't want to butcher any of it. There's other people out there that could speak more in depth about the benefits. Happy to dive into them. But for me, the main reason why I really started loving it is one, for recovery. I recently ran my first marathon, and obviously that comes with a lot of training over the last 2, 3, 4 months. So as I was running, I had some knee injuries, and just you get, super sore when you ramp up doing like 140, 150 miles a month. So the cold plunge really just provided a great way for recovery. And then most importantly is just the mental aspect of it, right? Starting your day with something challenging, starting your day with something that just puts you in a state of discomfort has been quite the mental game changer for me when it comes to performance, when it comes to mental clarity. And it's just something that you learn to love and equally hate, right? Like it never gets easier. And for me, it's become something that's not only important to me, but something I enjoy, and something that I love talking about, introducing to other people's lives, because I think, it took a handful of people that I follow online or even good friends of mine that it kept showing up, them getting in these ice baths, whether that's Jesse Itzler or whoever it may be. So yeah, it's been a really cool experience just to have that become a bigger part of my life.
That's amazing, dude. I love that. We had a guest on the show, Josh Bridges, who competed at a very high level in the sport of CrossFit, was a former Navy SEAL, just incredible human being. And he talked about, like, obviously he did it, I'm sure, for the recovery, the physical aspect, but just every single morning he wanted to do something that was super tough to just give him that confidence to go throughout his day. And you talk about, you enjoy it, like it's something you seek out. And obviously it's not, I feel like the discomfort of the initial shock and the pain never goes away, but the fact that you associate joy and attraction to something that's difficult, I feel like that's another way people can really breed confidence and just kind of set the tone for how they're going to go throughout their day.
Absolutely. And the way you said that just now is spot on, right? Because it wasn't always that way. And more up until recently, right? Like people associate, a lot of people, getting in a cold plunge with extreme pain, extreme discomfort, which is the truth. That's what it is, even for me. But over time, you start to seek this discomfort, um, and it just becomes not more enjoyable, but you realize the benefits that are happening, whether that's the dopamine increase, whether that's just the overall state of well-being, how you're feeling, the recovery aspects. And it's just like, wow, this is something that is changing me, and it's changing my daily routine. And like, we've all had different things we've tried to implement into our daily lives, and some of them are have worked out. Some of them, maybe you have to really spend the extra time, whether that's reading or journaling or whatever it may be. But for me, cold plunging has been something where I literally got it and I have not missed a day. And it's become such a part of my daily routine that I can't imagine my morning without it, to the point where, as you said at the beginning of the show, I'm in Michigan. There's a cold ice frozen lake, and I'm trying to break the ice to get in the water for 5 minutes or whatever it may be. So it's become something that you just start to see the world from a different lens and you want to seek out that discomfort.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, for me too, I think what I've seen and similar to running and I ran a marathon last December and I'm excited to talk to you about yours here in a moment. But similar to running, whenever I get in the cold plunge or I go for a run and maybe I don't want to do it initially, I never regret once it's over. I never regret that feeling of like, I got through this and I accomplished this and I can check it off. Obviously, there's like you were saying, there's a ton of physical benefits that your body is going to naturally produce these different things, in your body. But at the same time, like doing hard things in life will produce an outcome that you can be proud of and that you can understand why you had to go through what you did to get there. And I think there's a lot of power in that. Not to go super deep here, but I think for people listening, like if you can challenge yourself to do tough things, whether it is cold plunge, going for a run, something that's uncomfortable, if you can get to the other side and push through that, you're going to understand the benefits and the growth and the experience and the process that allowed you to get that initial result feeling.
Absolutely. Well said. And definitely excited to dive into your marathon journey as well, man. I mean, this has been something, this whole idea of mental toughness, but from the running aspect, just similar to cold plunging, it just came into my life in such an accelerated way where, last year at this time, the longest I ever ran was a 10K. I did a Thanksgiving turkey trot. And then prior to that, it was a 5 mile. Like last summer, the most I ever ran consecutively was probably 3-4 miles. And, I did cross country in high school and I've always been an athlete. I grew up playing hockey for 10 years. I started playing lacrosse in high school. And then sophomore year of high school is when I was playing football, got injured. I was in a neck brace for 6 months. And, that led me down this different path of business, of marketing, of eventually starting a podcast, getting into tech, and just completely changed the direction of my life. And I feel like the last year and a half, just slowly taking these steps into running through, again, like the people I follow online, the people that I look up to, really just it ramped up the past 3-4 months where I said this on another podcast that I had someone on recently where I was flying out to Vegas. Let me actually backtrack. So what was it? Last December, coming out of that Thanksgiving, my first 10K ever, I was in Santa Monica. I did my first 10 miler. And that was, the biggest thing for me at the time, and which is a huge accomplishment for anyone that's shooting to do that, right? Like going to run 10 miles and you've never done it before. Like for me, that was a great mental barrier. Then that leads to, let me go aim for a personal half marathon. So did that probably 2 weeks later out in Santa Monica again. And please cut me off if you want to ask a specific question, but I just want to try to tell this story to get to the marathon question. I did a couple half marathons. This was into January of this year, and I sort of pegged the date of like, I'm going to run a marathon 2022, and I was aiming for the LA marathon in March of this year. And then, but I think this is really important for my running journey that I now can reflect on is I wasn't taking it as seriously as I should have. Meaning this first time around earlier this year when I was quote unquote training for a marathon, I wasn't stretching enough by any means. I really didn't have the proper hydration diet to really optimize my performance when running these 10, 15 mile runs. I was like, I can do this. I feel good. Let me just get out there and go. And at the end of it, it led me to doing a 17-mile run where when I was training for this marathon in March, didn't have any proper training schedule in place, where I ended up injuring my knees to the point where I did the 17-mile run, knees excruciating pain. And of course, like your knees will hurt when you're doing long distance runs. But the next day I wake up and I can't even run a mile without feeling like I'm going to severely injure myself for the next 3 to 6 weeks. And of course, like you can push through pain intense, but something was wrong. Something was not good. So I ended up just leaning off of running. I'm like, hey, like I need to do this properly. Like this is not like what I know this is not right in terms of my training mechanism. So I ended up not doing the LA marathon. I didn't even, buy the ticket. It was like, I want to do this. I'm setting out to do it. Great. Knees injured, stopped running cold turkey earlier this year. And then fast forward to summer of this year, June, July, I start getting my miles back. I'm doing a mile a day, a couple five miles on the weekend, like really just stopped, truthfully.
Wow.
And then into September, you're catching the bug again. I'm really like, okay, I want to do a marathon still this year. I don't know when, but let me just get my miles back in. So I start ramping back up to like 20 miles a week, 20, 30 miles a week into September. And then in October, I remember just looking up these different marathons, and I was too close to the New York Marathon. By that time, it was like mid-October, and it was coming up in like 30 days, the New York Marathon, or less than that, I believe. And then I saw the Honolulu Marathon, which sounded really epic. I was like, I'm in LA, Honolulu is not that far. So I ended up just buying a ticket the next morning as I'm about to take off on my flight to Vegas to shoot a podcast. And I just committed to it. I was literally 45 days out from the marathon. In my eyes, not the most proper training as well, but I was already doing 20, 30 miles a week, taking it very seriously, getting my body in pristine shape, being very hydrated, like treating it like I'm going to go actually crush this. And it led me to not only, and I'll stop here and we can get more into it, but it led me to having a phenomenal first marathon. I think that was 3 weeks ago out in Honolulu. I ended up interviewing the CEO of the Honolulu Marathon, and I interviewed a lot of people leading up to the marathon, which we'll dive into, of like the actual marathon itself and some of the things I was going through mentally. But I interviewed some awesome people that inspire me when it comes to physical endurance and mental toughness the weeks prior to the race, which really helped me get through it and push through. And when I was on that journey.
Dude, that's incredible, man. Well, first off, congratulations. I mean, that's no easy feat. And the fact that you attacked it with that kind of process, I think is super interesting. But I could not agree more. Like, I'll be the first to admit, my when I ran my first marathon last year was the first thing my first challenge task that I completed after playing college basketball. And I was very naive. I went in very confident, knowing I was like, I played Division I sports.
Yep.
I'm relatively fit. Like, I think this is not going to be as hard as I thought. But there's so much. It's crazy, dude. Like, obviously there's a high level of fitness, and there's definitely a physical component to completing a marathon, but there's so much more strategy and just knowledge that you need in the sport of endurance that I lacked. And that definitely showed up on race day. And even into the training blocks. And yeah, I would love to hear more kind of about your experience. You talked about the second time around, you trained better, you had a better process, you took it more seriously, recovery and everything. Were you following any type of program? Were you programming yourself, or how did you kind of go about the training element?
So funny enough, this is great timing. So I have this product in front of me that I love, and I drink it every day, Super Coffee. So I'm good friends with the three brothers that created Super Coffee. And this was my really, and I got to give a shout out to Jordan DeSico. Are you familiar with Super Coffee?
Yeah. I've met those guys a few times.
Okay, sweet. So I've known the Super Coffee brothers for quite some time. They've always been a huge inspiration to me. I met them literally because I was back home in Virginia, like a couple years back, and I pick up a Super Coffee. I read the story on the side of the bottle, and I ended up reaching out to Jimmy, Jake, Jordan, and now I've had like Jordan on the podcast twice, Jake on the podcast twice. Whenever they're in LA, we'll do some miles. But it was really, in terms of like the training and the preparation. I remember Jordan and I were chatting. This is before I even committed to the marathon, and he was training for his first marathon in New York. Like, he's, all three of the brothers are the epitome of just
unreal
mode when it comes to what they do and just their mentality on life and endurance. But I remember I was like, hey, do you think I could, and this was like, as I said, I was doing 20 miles a week or so. I was like, do you think I could really be ready for this marathon if it's 45 days out? Like, do you think I could really do it? He's like, yes. And to your question, it was really Jordan that gave me this high level game plan of like how I should attack it, why I should be doing that. I asked him all the questions as okay, this is geared towards me specifically, but it wasn't any specific game plan on an app or following, having like a personalized coach. It was seeking counsel from people that are doing it, that have a great process themselves. And Jordan was someone that really provided me with a lot of context of my training schedule, which was good. And I think too, like my first marathon, now thinking about my second one, I would do it differently in terms of having an app to really track it. I would give myself more time. I would be doing way more hills and interval training.
Sure.
For me, it was just about going the distance. And even, and this will kind of segue to a separate conversation. For me, the marathon was never about hitting a specific time. It was truthfully, especially when I originally wanted to do one, it was truthfully about just going the distance and the mental challenge that that would come with. And yes, does speed add a more mental component and a more like high level approach to marathon training? Absolutely. But for me, early on in the journey, it was like, hey, I just want to go the distance, do not stop, and push myself, in which I feel a sense of accomplishment, but most importantly, learn what I'm capable of. But as time went on and the days started counting down to marathon day, my focus sort of started to go from like go the distance to like what time could I get to? And I think for me, and I'll say this before I wrap up this point. I interviewed a guy named James Lawrence, which you may or may not be familiar with, but he's known as the Iron Cowboy. And he set a world record for the most consecutive Ironmans in a day or over the course of time. So we did 101 Ironmans throughout the course of 101 days. Previously, he beat the record of originally 5 Ironmans back to back. Then he did 50 Ironmans in 50 days in all 50 states. And then years later, he decided to double his record and did the 101. And I interviewed him 2 weeks or a week and a half, I should say, prior to me running my marathon. And he said this to me, which really hit home. He said, "You only have one opportunity to run your first marathon. That's it. One
Wow.
opportunity." And, because we were talking about what's next in his life. And I was telling him how, I can already tell that after this marathon, I'm going to be thinking about what's next and excited about these other physical things I want to do. And he stopped me. He was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I get it. Like, we're all ambitious, but if you don't focus on that one step in front of the other, you're setting yourself up for failure. And most importantly, you only have one opportunity to run your first marathon. So he said that. And then back to my original point, that's when I zoned in and was like, okay, like, what do I want this first marathon to be? Like, what do I want to accomplish from a time perspective? That's when I really started to ask myself those questions. Truthfully, a week out from the marathon, which provided me with a lot of context and a whole different game plan on race day. So yeah, it definitely was my purpose for it has continued to evolve and shift throughout the months leading up to the day itself.
That's incredible, man. And I do want to talk on the race itself, but one question I had about following up on the training, and this is something I'm just curious as another entrepreneur if you experience this, but there are different things you can do to reach this kind of flow state, or whatever. A lot of people talk about flow state right now, but as I was training for my marathon, and even I've continued to run since that marathon and what I'm doing now, but anytime I run without music, and I shouldn't say anytime, most of the time when I run without music and I'm in a place where I can just kind of settle in and, kind of enjoy some of my thoughts, I've seen running absolutely transform my creativity from a business perspective and just life in general, that I haven't really seen it do that same exact thing in other areas of my life. And I'm curious if you kind of had similar experiences during training with running, or even outside of training, just running in general, where you've seen it actually do a lot more positive for your mind, beyond just the actual, physical improvements that you're experiencing from the activity.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and again, you said it's spot on, and this is a great question because my outlet for running really stemmed from that purpose of like, yes, wanting to test myself physically and push through the challenge of going the distance, whether that's 5 miles or 10 miles or running a marathon. But what I found over time, as you said, is you always hear runner's high, this flow state, and I never really pegged like what that meant to me up until really a couple months ago. And now, like when talking about it, I've found this zone where I can always count on like finding these new thoughts, and that's how I define it. Like running has allowed me to find new thoughts that I can't activate just by sitting on a couch or sitting at a desk, truthfully. And I
100%.
found that in terms of like a very literal sense, that happens for me right around mile 6 to 8. And like the first 5K, 10K of any run I do. It's just getting in the zone. It's finding this sense of um like being grounded and presence. But right around mile 6 to 8, that's when my body, for me, truthfully goes into this autopilot state. Not in the sense of I'm just coasting on my run. Like I'm always looking to improve, whether that's doing my negative splits or whatever it may be. But I find this like unleashing spirit of different ideas. And as you said, truthfully, like different, like from a creative aspect to a business aspect, and just ideas that, again, like I get to unlock.
Mm.
And it just gets more, like it opens up more as the miles go on. And I have found that to be very rewarding and also very therapeutic. And it's just this outlet of emptiness, right? When I run without music, similar to you, it's this time where time feels for me like it stops. You're in this state of flow. You're thinking about things that you don't get to focus on, or even think about often, because you have to find this state of flow. And I find that a very rewarding and enjoyable place. But most importantly, it feels rewarding because for me, I have to run a certain distance to feel that way. And for me, as the miles have increased, it feels like I get to extend that flow state, going from mile 6 to 12, great, but mile 6 to 20, 20 to 26. Um, it's been a fun journey, and I completely agree with you when it comes to unlocking that creativity. But I treat different runs differently. Some of them I'm listening to long podcasts, trying to learn something on the run. Some of them I have no music, and I just try to be present and focus on one or two critical questions I want to ask myself, or a problem that I'm facing in business. Or some of the times I'm just listening to music and just looking to push myself, and I'm in the zone. So I treat runs differently at times. Um, but yeah, running, I think, has been a great outlet, to the point where I'm now looking to seek out interviewing different high performance, high endurance athletes, and just asking the questions like you're asking today. I think this podcast and what you're doing is so cool, because you get to have these conversations and really dissect how someone thinks, whether that's myself or other people that are pushing themselves from a physical aspect. So it's just opening up this whole bucket of curiosity in my life that I think is very cool.
No, 100%. I love that, man. Take me to the race day itself. I would love to hear kind of how just the race itself went, some experiences you've had during the race. It's cool because obviously I only have one marathon to talk about, but there was throughout the course of that 26 miles, there were so many different experiences I felt, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like it was a full encompassing event. But I would love to hear your perspective on it, and maybe some things that you maybe learned about yourself, or some things that you went through during the course of the race.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, what marathon did you run? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I did the Kiowa Island Marathon, south, like near Charleston area in South
Okay.
Carolina, and I did it last December 11th.
Okay.
Um, you
That's
know,
when December 11th. That's when I did mine.
yeah. Well, I noticed
That's
that. It was
great.
actually funny because I saw when you were, getting ready to do yours. I was like, whoa, 1 year ago today, I did that one. So, yeah, it's fun. It's fun doing them in December. I'll let you kind of dive in, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to share some thoughts on mine as well. But yeah, there were some things I didn't realize going into it,
Yeah.
and it was a really cool experience. I mean, it was unreal. Like it was very, very cool for personal growth and physical growth, but also just like understanding that doing hard things is really fun and can really elevate what you do.
Absolutely. So getting to race day for me was something I felt extremely ready for, but the thoughts of, I will say, talking to people prior to race day, whether that's Super Coffee Brothers or buddies of mine that have done marathons, they've always, this is a very cliche thing to say, I think, if you're in this space, but it's like when you hit mile 20, you're halfway there. And, we might have all heard that before, but that thought in my mind, I didn't really know how to process it, right? Like the last 6 miles, like, of course, they will be the most challenging, but I was curious to know like what that would show to myself of who I am and what I can do. So taking you through it. So as I said, I ran the Honolulu Marathon, This was December 11th, 2022, and leading up to it, I I was putting myself in a place to seek out counsel. So as I said, I interviewed some awesome people that I truly believe helped me get through it, which I'll give you some context on here in a second. But James Lawrence, Iron Cowboy, he was someone that just really fired me up and gave me a lot of counsel of how to treat race day as like, hey, you only have one opportunity to run your first marathon. So speeding up to race day, the race starts at 5 a.m. I'm in Honolulu, beautiful, like completely filled with gratitude, truthfully, right? Like there's a lot of places you can run your first marathon, and the opportunity to run it in Hawaii, you can't complain about the weather. It's absolutely gorgeous. Like it was just a truthfully beautiful place that I was again like filled with gratitude. But race starts at 5 a.m. It was like a 45-minute walk to the starting line. All the roads are blocked off, right? So, that was the day where waking up at 2:45, getting to the race by like heading out about 3:15, getting to the race around 4, and then an hour of stretching and getting ready, getting prepped, and just the amount of people and the energy was surreal. Because for me, like, a lot of people will do so many races before their first marathon. The only real race I did prior to the marathon was 2 weeks prior to running the marathon, or sorry, 3 weeks, which was the Malibu half marathon, which is a much, much smaller race, but it got me in the energy of, oh, like this is how race works. Like this is completely new to me, all of this, right? So it was like never running much before, doing a couple half marathons myself, signing up for a half marathon in Malibu, and then boom, marathon in Hawaii. So I didn't have a lot of like real race preparation, right? In terms of like really encompassing the energy and all the people. So this race had about 27,000 people in it. And I remember when when the race started in Hawaii, there's these beautiful fireworks that go off, right? So all the fireworks are just the symbol of getting started. And I remember I started to pace myself at around like 8:45 to 9, the first mile, like really just like getting ready for this journey.
Smart.
And I could speak for hours about this journey itself, but just to simplify like how my mind was working and what I was thinking about and some of the challenges that I was facing. I'll preface it with this. 2 days prior to running the race, I was aiming for and again, and I said this prior earlier in the conversation, I didn't have an exact time I was shooting for, but I wanted to shoot for under 4:30. I wanted to shoot for like a 4 hour to 4:30. And that was my idea of, okay, like success, do not stop. Great. And then 2 days before the race, I just said, oh, like I'm absolutely going to finish under 4 hours. Like there's no other option. Like, because I'm thinking about, you only have one opportunity to run your first race. So that I was pegged at under 4 hours, right? So that was a average pace of 9:10, which is, fairly normal with my training pace. I was probably training at like an 8 to 8:30. And I remember just after mile one, just really getting in the groove of things and really pushing myself, maybe too fast, where I started I dropped to like a 7:30 pace mile two, just going from, okay, let me average at like 8:30, 8:45, get into it. First mile, I think was like 9:30. And then I just started picking it up, boom, dropped to like 7:30. And I felt, and I told a buddy of mine this, D Murthy, he has this awesome run club in LA, Grand AC Run Club. I truly felt everything on race day for me just went great in terms of how I was feeling, in terms of just pains I usually get early on in runs just weren't there. And I don't know if it was just a mental thing or what, but towards the first 10K, 6 miles in, I was just feeling really, really great. And that's when the course really shifted to a lot of uphill, downhill, rolling hills, which for me, going back to training, I didn't train any hills prior to race day. And I knew there was gonna be hills. I was doing a lot of flat runs, and that was a huge disadvantage for me. But I felt confident, and the Malibu half marathon had some hills, and they didn't really phase me. In terms of like, some people just, the hills will get to you, and they definitely did at times. But getting to mile 15, I was really feeling great. And one thing I'll say is when I interviewed James Lawrence, I asked him for a piece of advice and I told him, I'm going to be listening to this podcast that we're doing on race day. And how you answer this question will be the words of wisdom to myself during this moment. And I asked him, what advice would you give to me when I'm 22, 23 miles in on my first marathon? And then it was really cool. He shifted his dynamic of conversation rather the rather, giving an answer to the Casey that's on Zoom with him in the moment currently. I could tell he really took a step back and was speaking to Casey Adams, the racer who's on mile 22 that's listening to this right now, right? Like just his tone and everything. And one thing he said is, you know, when you reach mile 20, because the farthest I've ever ran was 20 miles, and he knew that. He's like, when you reach mile 20, you're going into uncharted territories. And he broke it down. He broke it down in a way where he said, once you reach mile 20, you're going to uncharted territories, and that is called the hurt locker, how he says it. The hurt locker is a place where you've never been. It's a place where those next 6 miles it's either they'll make or break you in terms of your mental fortitude and your mental toughness. So as I was approaching mile 20, and I said this in a recap video that I posted on Instagram, I was really mentally preparing myself, and I'm a very like visual person. So, when you see the 20-mile flags on the left-hand side of the road, as I was approaching this 20-mile marker, which was like into my eyes, the entrance of the hurt locker, I pictured these very large red doors, like 500-foot doors. And as I was getting 100 feet, 50 feet, 10 feet away from, passing into mile 20, I just saw them open up and just explode. I was like, I really was preparing myself to go into a sense of beast mode, right? Like I knew this was going to be a true challenge for me. And I know I'm going on, but this is a critical part of the story here, which is, the last 6 miles of the race, I learned more about myself, what I'm capable of, the conversations I have with myself during moments of pain and suffering and physical challenge, more than I ever have my entire life. And specifically from miles 22 to 25, those 3 miles, because going into mile 20, from mile 20 to 21, I felt phenomenal. Like I dropped my pace. I was at like a 7:30 the whole race, some miles like 7:15, around 7. And I was like, okay, I'm running really fast, but I feel great. And in terms of like for me and what my expectations were. And then literally I was running with this guy. We're going into mile 22. And that's when I feel like within a moment, like from mile 20 to 21, great. From mile 21 into 22, it truly felt like the energy and life was being sucked out of me for a brief moment. Like I had this sense of, oh my God, am I going to black out? Oh my God. Like you're seeing people drop out left and right. I'm like, okay, do I have to walk? And I'm just processing all these things, but really trying to be present and most importantly, those last 3 miles, 22 to 25, it goes from being a relatively flat course to extremely uphill those last 3 miles into the last 26 mile. And it was a phase of enjoyment, a phase of suffering, a phase of internal dialogue that I've never reached before in terms of the conversations I was having with myself, where I ended up slowing down on the uphill initially from 7:30 up to 8, up to 9-minute pace for a brief moment. And then I remember I was listening to, because I turned it on right when I was getting into mile 21, the podcast with James Lawrence towards the end. And it was like we were having a conversation, right? Like him in my ears talking, like listening to his feedback. it's obviously all personal in terms of what you have to do to keep going, but just hearing that sense of conversation and comparing it, not even comparing, but just understanding what he went through, right? 101 Ironmans over the course of 101 days, and you you seek wow, you ask yourself, wow, like this is a drop in the bucket, and there's no reason to complain. Like you need to go all in on this moment and really listen to like you only have one shot to run your first marathon. So again, I know I've been chatting and going on quite the tangent here across different conversations, but wrapping up those 3 miles into mile 20 into mile 26, it then shifted downhill and it was just all out, go as fast as I can, push through and just really, and I say this very in a very in a very grateful way. The last mile or 1.3 miles, I was such in a state of gratitude, just appreciating the moment, appreciating every step in front of me, appreciating the people around me and crossing that finish line because it was a very special moment for me. And I tried to really encompass what James was telling me of, you have one shot to run your first marathon, enjoy it and be present. And I ended that race in it was 3 hours, 36 minutes. So almost an hour faster than what my definition of success was. And I felt very great about the time. But man, was it a journey. And I learned more about myself during those 4 miles or 3 miles, 22 to 25. And, as I take a step back and really just wrapping up this point, not only did I learn about myself, but I learned about myself and how I can manage in business, in business conversations and when things are going wrong and just life overall. And people ask me, why did I run the marathon? It had nothing to do with really the journey itself, but preparing myself for suffering throughout life. And you hear this in different ways from different people. And for me, it was just such a powerful journey that I'm excited for what's next, man. And again, I know I've been chatting and talking for quite some time now, Doug, and I can't wait to hear more about your journey as well. But man, was it a journey and ups and downs and mental battles that just truthfully are hard to explain at times versus actually doing it. So I'm grateful for the journey and I'm excited for what's next.
Dude, that is incredible, dude. I love that. And honestly, I think your experience was very similar to mine in a lot of ways, and some of the things that you went through and kind of had to endure to complete the race and actually fulfill that, goal of setting out to run 26.2 miles. So that's unbelievable, dude. I think, the two biggest things that I struggled with mine was one, pacing. I'm not good at pacing. I had no concept of, going out of the gate in a conservative way. My second mile was 6:20 and I was cooking and I was like, dude,
Oh
like,
my God.
yeah, I went,
620?
yeah, 6:20, dude. And I was like,
Oh my
man,
God.
I just want to, get out and go fast. And I didn't, 26 miles is a long time. And I think in my mind going at it again, that was a mistake I made. And then honestly, from a nutrition and fueling standpoint, I totally didn't have that dialed. And so that was pretty tough for me. I'm like 6'4", so I'm a little taller and I think my body needs a little bit more fuel.
Yeah.
But around mile 22 for me, I got my legs completely locked up with cramps, like both of them. It was super
Wow.
humid in South Carolina, and I lost a lot of water, and that was the most challenging thing for me. But flipping it to the mental side, during those moments when my legs were locked, and I was like, it literally hurt so bad to take a step. I was like, okay, I can either, like you were saying, I can quit here, I can throw it in, or I can go one step at a time and I can get closer to that finish line. And eventually, thankfully, the cramps did loosen. And it's just, I don't know, man. Again, not to get deep and make it all metaphorical, but it really is like seeking that suffering and seeking those things that are challenging and hard. You begin to itch for it. You begin to desire it. You begin to be like, dude, I want that pain because I know what's going to come from it. And then once you do it enough, the confidence levels just continue to exponentially rise. And I think there's so much power in that. And so it's really cool to hear, your story and kind of what you learned throughout your process. And Yeah, just to kind of hear even the energy you speak about it with is infectious, because it makes me like I want to do another one, just because you talk with people who have similar interests, similar characteristics of doing these things and pushing themselves and being better in life. And honestly, that's been the biggest blessing of what I've tried to kind of create with this podcast platform, is just a community of people that want to seek out these things, and just understanding how cool it is not only to better themselves, but better the people around them too. And so having these conversations is so much fun for me. So I appreciate you sharing that experience in your race.
Absolutely. And I mean, this has been so much fun to do because I really haven't spoken about my marathon specifically in a public format, and articulated it in a story format to share my lessons in the journey itself, rather than just with friends or at Christmas dinner recently, right? So this has been so fun for me, and the platform that you're building is so impactful. But one thing that I would do want to say is something that I just kept repeating to myself that I think is not only important, but if you really focus on it, it just can transform your thinking, right? So James Lawrence, he also told me to say or to think about, as you said, right? Your legs are cramping up, you're 22 miles in. What's one thing that can just provide instant gratitude is the next step isn't going to kill me. The next step isn't going to kill me. The next step isn't going to kill me, right? And I remember saying this literally every single step I tried to, right? Like, it's not going to kill me. It's not going to kill me. It's not going to kill me. And just being so present of like, you put yourself here because you wanted to, and now you are there. Now you get to endure what you've been seeking. And I think that, hearing your journey, and now, maybe people listening to my journey, it is about the journey itself, right? And I remember coming out of race day, and even still today, the pursuit of striving for race day, the pursuit of the training itself that leading up to race day, in my eyes, is 100 times more fulfilling than race day itself. Not to discount it by any means, but the act of being on that journey and the art of preparation, preparing your mind, preparing your body, right? Like the biggest thing for me leading up to the marathon was just the true lifestyle change that I had to endure when it comes to, the running throughout the week, to the long runs on the weekends, to the dieting, to, no drinking, just really setting myself up to put myself through this physical challenge. Coming out of that race, and now I'm in this mental state leading into 2023 where I'm pinpointing the next marathon I want to do, and just getting ready to, I want to put myself in that place of preparation again, because I think you learn so much in the preparation. And for me, that was such a monumental part of the destination, is the journey itself, and the lifestyle changes you have to make, and the newfound confidence you have to have, and the discipline you have to have towards preparing. Because if you don't prepare and you don't take it seriously, you're setting yourself up for failure. And being able to do that, but also, run a business, to do these podcasts, to travel, to have a relationship, like you really have to make time, right? And I think that's the most important thing, right? Like it's very easy, and we all have, everyone has their own journey in life, but I think running and preparing for something like a marathon or any type of big physical feat, you learn to say no to things that you maybe would say yes to, right? Whether that's going to the extra dinner or going out with friends, not because you don't necessarily want to, but because you don't have that higher force of, okay, like I'm training for this, or this is coming soon, and I can't just say yes to this. I have to put myself in a position to win on that day, whether that's training or just getting a good amount of sleep, whatever it may be. So I think that just hearing your journey is so important. And really, to summarize that point, just looking around on race day and seeing 27,000 people that are preparing for that, it makes me so just curious of, everyone is on this journey for a specific, not only for a reason, but for a different reason. And this race or this journey means something completely different to everyone. And I find that so cool and unique. And just hearing your journey and, you know, my journey and speaking about it today, like they're very different, but they're also very similar in terms of the actual training and preparation of what we went through. But the reasoning and the outcome of it, I think it's so cool to hear, because it's something that you just, now that I can relate to someone that has run a marathon. I think it's very cool to hear that journey and understand some of the things that you went through. And I think that whoever's listening to that, just having that, you know, that destination you're seeking just completely transform your thinking, and what you're capable of from a business perspective or just life overall, right? Like you're preparing yourself for the hard times in life. And I think that is a beautiful thing to do.
1,000. I love that. I think that's really, really strong. And it's really cool to see, like you said, not to just, not to reiterate too much, but the discipline that requires to train properly and to execute a marathon translates to everything you do in life, whether that, like you said, your relationships, your business. And that's, to me, when I got into this, coming from a background of playing basketball, like that's a team sport. Like, yes, obviously I have a personal obligation to come up, show up, and bring my own value to the team. But again, we're competing together versus training for a marathon. Yes, I did train a couple days with other people, but that's very much me versus me on my own. There's no team. There's no one else that I'm like, necessarily doing this for except for myself. And so, making that adjustment was pretty big for me. But then again, to go even deeper and just see all those little things, whether it's, you, similar to you, obviously you're on the West Coast, so maybe this is something you didn't experience quite as much as I did. I was training in the North Carolina mountains in November, December. It was cold. And a lot of times, I'd have a busy day at work. So I'd be like, I'm going to get up early and I'm going to crush it at, 6, 7 in the morning, maybe even earlier than that some days. And it was 20 degrees. And so those little choices, decisions you make really do transition and really affect the other things you do in your life. And I think there's so much power in that too, is just, just get everything you can out of the experience and understand that it really can transform and just make you a better human being. So it's a really cool experience.
Absolutely. I love that, man. And yeah, I didn't get to train a lot in the cold. So the last couple of days of being in Virginia and now in Michigan, I'm trying to get some runs in, and I think it was 17 of the day. And it's a whole different game. So respect to you. And it's cool to, experience running in these different climates. And I'm glad I'm out here in Michigan now where it's snowing and it's a different environment to go test myself.
No doubt, man. Well, dude, I want to be super sensitive to your time. So if you need to wrap up, let me know. But I would love to chat on some business stuff, because obviously it's really cool to see, you complete this marathon, and it sounds like you're going to do a lot more physical feats and different things that, you want to accomplish. But from a business perspective, you've been incredibly successful. You've helped a lot of people. You've been very innovative. You really kind of started to make a name for yourself in that space. And even with your podcast, maybe we could even start there. Would love to just kind of hear a quick story of why you started your podcast and how that all kind of came about.
Yeah. So, I got into this whole world of business and social media really, I like to say by accident, but I really don't think things happen by accident, right? But it was unplanned. So I briefly mentioned it earlier, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I got injured playing football. That led to me being in a neck brace for 6 months. And it was really during this 6-month journey of being in a neck brace, being depressed, really not sure what I want to do with my time or my life, right? My path prior to that was, I want to go play lacrosse at UVA. Like that's my definition of success in that phase of life. And that quickly changed where I could never play football again, couldn't play lacrosse. And, quite frankly, they said, based on how you recover, like, you have a very unstable spine where, I'm a big snowboarder and I've just always been a physical active person. And luckily I did recover and I can snowboard and I can run, but how that transitioned to a business aspect is coming out of that 6 months journey. I found myself finding different people online, or mentors, I should say, that I was following, someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, or Tony Robbins, and just fell into this whole world of personal development when I was 16 years old in Virginia, in high school, sophomore going into junior year. And I remember just filling all of my time with this newfound fulfillment in a sense of, I started reading all these different books, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends, Influence People, these different biographies of entrepreneurs. And I didn't come from a family of any entrepreneur at all. Like my mom's been a school teacher. My dad's worked at a factory, Philip Morris, for 30 years. And I just didn't come from this world of business and entrepreneurship. And I was instantly just pulled into it and just became obsessed. And that led me to starting my first company in high school, which was just a Facebook ads agency doing Facebook ads for local businesses in my area, for like my dentist and my chiropractor and the local sports shop, and just, working with them on a retainer, a monthly basis of managing the social media and running Facebook ads. And this was all new to me. I was learning it as I go. I jumped in the deep end, and I just had this confidence to, start something and to, hopefully start making money at the age of 16, where I didn't have to go get a job and work at the local restaurant. Right. And just went all in on that and had some successes early on. And that led to the podcast, where I wanted to put out content. I wanted to I shouldn't say I wanted to put out content. I wanted to document my story and share it online on social media. And whether one person saw it or 100,000 people saw it, like, that was my purpose and my intention. So after 12 months of doing Facebook advertising and like following people on social media and just slowly but surely documenting my journey, I started meeting, just in terms of meeting as in like a social sense of connecting with people, DMing them, having conversations briefly. And I remember I read one of Gary Vee's books back in 2017, 2018, and the last chapter was on podcasting. It was his book, Crushing It. And I didn't even think twice, man. I read this chapter. It spoke to me of, I think he mentioned things like, podcast is a great place where you can connect deeper with people, build relationships, create content, and most importantly, learn something, right? Like, you can ask questions to people that you would admire, that you want to seek counsel from. And without blinking, I remember recording my first episode on a pair of Apple headphones, walking in circles in my room, like, oh, welcome to Rise of the Young, which my show was previously called. Now it's the Casey Adams Show. But I remember just starting the show. I actually just recently hit my 5-year podcast anniversary since the first day of publishing, which was December 21st. So just 6 days ago. And on that day, December 21st, 2017, it was a 17-year-old kid in his bedroom, with the ambitions to hopefully interview some world-class, interesting entrepreneurs. And I had no game plan. I had no really intentions of where it would lead to, or even necessarily doing it for 5 years. I just clicked go and I figured it out. And over time, it quickly became not only just something I did with my time and something to learn from, but truthfully, my identity, and something that has opened up every single door in my life, if I really think about it. Where the first 90 days of having the show, I interviewed 60 different entrepreneurs, and some of those people were, it was Gary Vaynerchuk, it was Drama from Young and Reckless, it was Grant Cardone, it was Andy Frisella, it was all these different people that inspired me, that I was following on social. And then, long story short, 5 years later now, I've had over 400 different entrepreneurs or just individuals on the show. They're not all business owners. I've branched out into different sectors, sections of, who someone is on my show. But some of those people range from the late Larry King, right before he passed away, to authors like Robert Greene, to Elon Musk's mom and sister, to the founders of Netflix and Twitch, to, owners of NBA teams like the Houston Rockets, Tillman Fertitta. And throughout all these conversations, my intention was always, have a conversation with people and make it impactful for my audience and listeners. B, how can I meet people, build a network? And C is, with this network, how can I tap into it for a positive and impactful way throughout my journey? So really, to transition into a business setting, Media Kits, my tech startup, my partner Kieran and I, we started Media Kits we launched it in August 2021, but there was a year preparation of ideation and just preparing to launch a tech product. And for context, and everyone's listening, just for the sake of time, Media Kits was recently acquired just about 3-4 months ago by a big marketing tech company up in Toronto called Viral Nation. And the journey to get there, very similar to a marathon. I could compare them to so many different avenues of the I'm so ready. Oh my God, it's falling apart. Oh my God, like this mental journey is a beautiful thing. But Media Kits, for people that may not know, it was the easiest and still is the easiest way for social media creators, podcasters, musicians to create a media kit, which is similar to a digital resume utilizing real-time data and analytics. So you connect all your social platforms to our platform, and then we instantaneously create a media kit for you with all of your cross-platform social analytics that you can easily share through a link with a brand or someone that you're looking to do a deal with. And it's forever up to date. So we had this idea because back in 2018, one of our good friends, he's a big automotive creator named JR Garage, and he came to us and he said, "Hey guys, Pennzoil reached out to me." And trust me, this is all going to come back to the podcast. You'll see. But he said, "Hey, Pennzoil reached out to me. They asked for my media kit. Can you make me one?" And Kieran and I were like, "What's a media kit?" "Oh, it's a digital resume." We ended up finding out, and we go on Canva, Photoshop. We're asking Jeff for all of his screenshots of his social media data and analytics. We put it in this beautiful document on Canva, and we're just typing in the numbers. It's very outdated in our opinion. And we send it to him. After a couple hours, he gets the deal. And then 3 weeks later, he comes back to us and says, "Hey guys, Ferrari contacted me. They asked me for my media kit. Can you go update all my analytics and statistics? I grew 100,000 subscribers. My top video is different. I just want to change it all." So we're like, "Sure." So we change it all. It takes us 30 minutes, an hour. We send it to him. He gets the deal again. And that's really when we asked ourselves, why isn't there a way for creators to create a media kit that never gets outdated, that you can easily share through a link instead of these PDFs that you have to attach in emails and then they're just static and they never change? And then why isn't there a way for brands to view trusted and authenticated cross-platform data from creators instead of relying on screenshots that you can easily fake, instead of relying on PDFs that instantaneously become outdated, especially in this age of TikTok where creators can grow 1 million followers in a month if they have a video that blows up, right? So that's when we had this idea. And I mean, now that I'm thinking about, this conversation of being a marathon, back in 2018, when we had this idea, it was very similar to me attempting to train for my first marathon. I didn't have the preparation. The timing wasn't right. I didn't do the necessary things. So I was in high school when we had this idea. Kieran was starting his first company, a different company, and we had this idea and the timing wasn't right. So we ended up shelving the idea. And then we came back to it when COVID was happening back in 2020. We saw this rise of TikTok creators really blowing up towards the middle of 2020. That's when we really started to not only take it seriously, but start investing into the project, really bootstrapping it initially, just getting the initial designs and mock-ups of what the platform could look like, and just really focusing on the design aspect of the tech product, because we never built tech. We had a lot of people in our lives that did, and we were seeking a lot of great counsel, but it was new to us. So we ended up bootstrapping it for 6 months, and then fast forward to early 2021, that's when we went to go out and raise our first round of funding, which we ended up raising just over $1.3 million. And I say all that and I tell that story to help people understand the power of a podcast, because when we went to go out and fundraise, probably 90 to 95% of the capital raised for Media Kits initially was through not only direct previous podcast guests on my show, but relationships that I've met through the podcast over the years. And we ended up having 37 different angel investors, like a very vast group of people, incredible strategic investors that truthfully came through the podcast. I can always tie it back to, I have someone on the show and they maybe introduce me to someone, or we cross paths because of them. And that was always my plan, and still is this podcast is such a sense of it's just like it's the core of everything that I do. It's the conversations that I have where I want to learn something. It's the opportunity to meet someone to learn something about a new topic. If I want to go to start a company in a completely new industry that I'm not that familiar with, if I have them on my podcast, I can ask them questions and learn about it from an expert in that field. that's a phenomenal and truthfully an advantage when it comes to getting ahead and learning about that space. But then, we launched Media Kits in August 2021. We had this big launch party. We had Wiz Khalifa perform. We had like 600 creators come out. And then we launched it. And just under 12 months later, after going through the ups and downs of startup life that I could get into for another hour if we had the time, we ended up getting acquired. And we announced it, I believe it was early September of this year, 2022. So now the company, the product, we are all working inside of this new company, Viral Nation, continuing down our product roadmap and slowly integrated into their entire tech ecosystem. But as a founder, it was quite the journey. And I will say, like, through M&A discussions and through the ups and downs of business, of having a tech startup and going through when capital markets are drying up, through a potential recession, through COVID and all these different things that may have an impact on business and how you operate from a fundraising perspective. Not only did I learn the most, like, I feel like this last year of my life, very similar to those last 2 to 4 miles in that marathon, where, you can run the 20 very often and you just know how to do it. And it's hard to get there. But once you do it, like, you can do it again, like, very similar to business. But once you reach that new level, whether that's doing something you've never done before, like raising capital or running a marathon and experiencing those last 6 miles, I felt like I've learned more about business and about myself in business more in the last 12 months than I have the last 5, 6 years. And, that starts from me being in high school, right? And of course, you're going to learn a lot through that period of life from 16 to 22, but going through an M&A process and raising capital and just getting familiar with that side of business was very similar to from mile 22 to 24 about learning about myself. And I think that running and endurance is very similar to business in so many ways of, pushing through hardships, learning about yourself. And when things get hard, it's like you either push through and you get through it and you become stronger and you have that new self-belief in yourself, or you collapse and you stop, right? Like it's very, in my eyes, similar. And one quote that I try to live by is how you do anything is how you do anything is how you do everything. Right. So I think that if I stopped running on that marathon on mile 24, I would have the very similar results in business where I, wouldn't be able to raise capital, wouldn't be able to go through a successful M&A process. So I think that just taking that approach to life of how you do anything is how you do everything is a great thing to live by, and it will help you sharpen your edges in every area of your life.
Insane, dude. That's so good, man. First off, congrats on the acquisition. I know that's a huge deal and something not to be taken lightly. I mean, I know there's a lot of hard work that went into building that platform, and to be able to partner with such a credible and successful company like Viral, I know that's a really awesome achievement. So congrats on that, man.
Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I want to wrap this thing up because I know you've got a lot of exciting things to do, like go mess around on the lake today. But you're very well positioned to speak on your experiences. Obviously, you've had a lot of success. A product of a lot of hard work that you've put in and knowledge that you've acquired and all these things. If you could nail it down to one thing that you've kind of learned, a lesson you've learned, a mindset you've learned throughout the process of business that you think could be really valuable for someone else to hear, what do you think that would be?
There's a lot of things that I could say, but one thing that comes to mind, especially right now after this conversation of physical endurance, but also business context, and just talking about the podcast, right? If I had to summarize all the conversations from all the world-class entrepreneurs I've had on the show, the one characteristic that I feel very aligned with, that I like to speak and vocalize, is this idea of simply never quitting. I mean, those two words, never quitting, and then just to add to that and to bring in some of the inspiring conversation that I had with Larry King that truly impacted me, is stay curious and never quit. And what I mean by that simple statement, stay curious, never quit, is if you similar to you right now, right? When you saw me on my Instagram story December 11th of this year, and you said, "Oh wow, I ran a marathon a year prior," and on the same day, you have grown so much from that moment. And I think that this idea of staying curious about life, about what's next, about what you can accomplish in business or in life is so important because as time goes on, and I'm young, 22, and there's a lot. I'm sure you've had so many different guests on the show that are well beyond my years and in terms of knowledge and experience. But from my perspective, I've you see a lot of people, whether that's family or old friends, that just stay the same, and they don't have massive changes in their life, whether that's physical, whether that's experiential, etc. Where this idea of staying curious, I believe, is so important because I know, the Doug today is going to be a completely different person than the Doug on December 27th, 2023. Right. And I mean, that for me, that I look at that and I say that's because you're curious. You're curious about what you're capable of. You're curious about what more is there in the world that you can achieve. And I think that if you want to lead a successful life and you want to just keep taking that next step, similar to on a marathon, right? Like you have to focus on that next step. Taking a next step in life for me is just staying curious, whether that's reading another book and listening to another podcast, meeting that other person, going to that other event, pursuing that company because you're curious about that industry, curious about running. So you run your first 5K, 10K, and you're just staying curious about, what you're capable of. And then this idea of another tangent of never quitting is every single person I've ever interviewed and successful person I've come across, they've had moments of extreme failure, but moments that truly define them, that they now get to speak on, and they have the privilege of speaking on. Meaning, in that moment that they now talk about, something like, let's say James Lawrence, he can speak on stages, he can inspire people all over the world because he went through the battle and came out on the other side, and he simply never quit. Right, 101 Ironmans. He set out to do 100. He did the last 101 just so that he could prove to people and say, like, go the extra mile or go the extra Ironman. So this idea of never quitting is truthfully, in my opinion, one of the only things that truly matters because you are going to want to quit when you start a business at times, right? Things are going to suck. Whether that's from you can't raise capital, no one's buying your product, you're going through recessions, and people are stop spending money, or when you're running a marathon, when you're cramping up in your legs, you feel like you're blacking out. Like in life, there's going to be thousands of times that you want to quit. And from my experience of speaking with these people, they now have the privilege of speaking on their experience because they just never quit. So if you're thinking about throwing it in, it's just that's not the path to success. So just to wrap it up again and to say what I would like to leave people with is stay curious and never quit.
I love that, dude. Alex Hormozy talked about it in a podcast I listened to recently, but he literally talked about if you don't want to lose, don't quit. As long as you don't quit, you technically haven't lost and you have more time in the game to continue to go. And it doesn't, you might be down by 50 points in the game, but as long as you don't quit and you keep just chipping away, like you can continue to move forward and eventually win that game. And so that's really good advice, Casey. Dude, you're an incredible human, and I'm very grateful to be able to connect with you and have this conversation. And hopefully it really did help a ton of people listening because you bring such a unique perspective and value to life and this conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely, Doug. This was so much fun. Congrats on the show. Congrats on everything. And I truly had a great time. So I appreciate you, man.
Let's go, man. We'll have to have you back. And next time I'm in LA, or we'll have to link up and get some miles in.
Absolutely. You already know. Let's do it.
Thank you, brother.
Of course.